Combat Vet 35 here. Today I've got a high point 9mm, brand new, retailed for $169. Taxes and fees, I was right at $200 even. Gonna open it up and see what it looks like. Also have the $25 8-shot magazine. Here is the high point 9mm model C9 9mm Luger. Yeah, it's black, I guess. These are other color options, maybe. I don't know. High point firearms from Strassel's, Michigan. No, Strassel's Machine. Sorry, reading upside down there, and I'm slightly handicapped, apparently. Yeah, so let's open it. First thing is a ghost ring sight. Interesting. And instructions and an Allen wrench on how instructions on how to install it and an Allen wrench to install it, I assume. Here is the firearm itself. A bag, a sticker, chamber indicator, a trigger lock, a warning, stop, you must read this, which shows assessment. All firearms are dangerous, please be careful. It has a parts list, which will be useful, I'm sure, with this firearm. For the numerous amount of times you have to call it and say, hey, my $169 firearm quit working. I need you to replace part number 34, 33, 32, 1 through 20, etc. It is equipped with a last round hold open mechanism, so the empty magazine will cause the firearm to lock open while you are firing. The safety lever will lock the slide back. It does not have a dedicated slide lock, but the safety mechanism is used to lock the slide back. Barrel should be brushed every 300 to 400 rounds. Complete disassembly and cleaning should be performed every 1500 to 2000. Disassemble the firearm, we move the slide to the rearmost position, push the safety up to lock the slide back, and exposing the rear, the retainer pin at the rear frame. Using a 1/8 pin punch, blah blah blah, pull safety down, listen slide around, turn and retract slide 3/8 inch and pull upward. Hold rear slide up and push forward. Wow, that sounds very fun. Moving on, the last thing in the box. Hang fires and how to avoid them, plus a youth handgun safety notice and Massachusetts Attorney General warning. Alright, we don't need any of that. Paperwork, that is. Standard box here. Nothing fancy. Cardboard, kind of like the cheap, the more affordable Luger LCP comes in a similar box, although it did come with a fancy case. Some firearms come with fancy cases, like the XDM case. This is the firearm I'm currently carrying. It's the Springfield XDM. Comes with all kinds of fancy things, like a mag pouch, which I'm wearing right here on the belt. You can see that. Different back pieces. Yes. Comes with a loader to help you load the magazines because they hold 19 rounds. It gets hard to push the spring down. 2 extra magazines. It's pretty fancy. And this was, I bought this for $400 used. I think you can get it for $495. Alright, back to this. Unbagging. Unbagged. There's a sticker. Pointing the muzzle at myself, but I do notice there's a chamber flag indicating that the weapon is not loaded. Trying to take the sticker off, and it's leaving a huge mess on the firearm. Just gonna stick it to this Luger box right here, and we'll have to get some Goo Gone to clean that up. So there's our safety indicator they were referring to in the documentation a minute ago. There's a magazine and a very clunky magazine release, and the whole frame moves when you push on it, which is interesting, but the magazine does not release fully. Magazine is empty. 8-shot 9mm magazine. Let's put it back in. The slide should lock to the rear because the magazine's empty, and it does. Impressive. no way to release the slide with an empty magazine in, so we'll have to eject it. So, function check, it works so far. Let's drop the magazine. Chamber's empty. Slides down. Let's put the safety on, which is the task in itself. Pulling the trigger does nothing. Safety down. Pulling the trigger does nothing. Maybe it has a magazine disconnect. Safety down. Alright. Again, drop the slide. Put the magazine back in to engage the magazine disconnect. And put it on safe. So the magazine disconnect is functioning properly and the safety is functioning properly. I did notice on these firearms that if you pull the safety halfway, the red's exposed, but it's not working. You gotta make sure and hear that click, which is a task in itself. The pull is nice and tight, but it's got a long pull for a single action pistol. You can see that. Not only that, it feels like it's about 10 pounds. I could be wrong. Obviously, I'm not a gauge, so couldn't tell you for sure. Don't have my gauge handy, or otherwise I would measure it. If you can see that, how far it moves. Alright. I pulled it all the way to the rear. Push the slide block up. Let's see if I can release it. I did. Do it again. To the rear. There's no serrations on the front, and the serrations on the back are pretty small. I've inserted this clip here to show the difference between my carry piece, which is the Springfield XDM9. The serration on the Springfield XDM is much more prevalent. You can see it at the rear of the slide and at the front of the slide as well. It makes it very easy to grab a hold of. You can rack the weapon very easily. Your fingers don't slip. Gloves or no gloves. You can do function checks. You can do, chamber checks. Many other things very easily. The high point serrations just aren't present like this. You could probably get some grip tape and stick it on the top of the high point slide to make it easier to grip, but the factory the factory setup isn't going to work very well. It's just going to make it more difficult to rack. And the spring on this feels really heavy. If you don't like a slide that's hard to pull back, would not purchase this firearm. You're going to have a hard time pulling the slide back. But for $170, if it fires, which I haven't test fired it yet, it's definitely worth it. I mean, it's an affordable firearm. It's interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to do it again. Lock the slide back. Slide's locked back. I'm exposing the rear takedown pin. Alright, so if you can see, the rear takedown pin is right here in this notch in the slide. So I'm going to grab a 1/8 inch punch. I have my 1/8 inch punch, which is bent from my my Winchester 50 antique shotgun that I was working on last night. But anyway, so there's cutouts on both sides of the slide, so I assume the pin will just push all the way through. Start with a piece of wood. Let's see if it gets it with that. I can see some potential problem here. Where the slide is locked back, it is almost flush with the edge of the takedown pin hole. So it might be, you have to get another couple of millimeters out of the slide after it's locked down to actually get the pin out. I'm doing it flat against the table because there is a gap there where the slide is. The humongous slide is. Let's try the other direction again. Doesn't seem to be moving. Let's go. I gotta straighten this punch out on my press. That's a little bit straighter. Let's try again. Aha! I felt it move. And look at that. It's coming out. It's like a standard roll pin. And I'm using a roll pin punch. It has a knob on the end of it. Okay, it feels like we're against the table while I'm hitting it, so I'm going to prop it up on this wood, tap it some more, and there we go. Pins out. Here's our roll pin. You see that? Put it in my palm, maybe. Hold it up for the camera. It is. Alright, so now it says release the slide lock, let the slide go forward, pull it back 3/8 of an inch, and lift up, and then let it go forward. I didn't mention the spring was going to shoot out the front of it, which it did. It's okay. Interesting. So we have a barrel that's either not removable or it's pinned in. This might be a pin for the barrel right here. Let's see. It wants to move. The magazine disconnect. Hard to say. So let's take a look at the slide first. Wow. Okay, so we've got an open firing pin here inside of the slide. Got this little plastic piece keeping the firing pin in, little plastic firing pin retainer, and then we've got the firing pin spring, which looks like a two-part spring. It's got an external spring that's smaller, an internal spring, external spring that's bigger, that slides over the smaller internal spring. You can see that. Then we have our firing pin, which is very short. It's hollow in the back. And yeah, alright. Well, the firing pin is definitely easy to take out if you compare it to most semi-automatic handguns like this Springfield XDM, for example, which is much easier to break down. By the way, you just flip this little thing up and the slide comes off. The firing pin is completely contained except for the little spring in the back. Then you've got a plastic keeper here that does not come out easily, whereas the one on our pistol just fell out. And reassembling, so simply a matter of that, and good to go. Of course, that handgun costs more than twice as much as this handgun, but you got to keep telling yourself over and over again. So if you look at the internals on the slide, that's pretty standard. There's a big mark right here, which looks like a blemish, which is interesting. Doesn't matter, you won't be able to see it though, as long as it doesn't affect the functionality of the firearm. This slide is almost as heavy as this whole pistol. Okay, so to reinstall the firing pin, let's do it before I forget how to do it. Take the firing pin, insert it in the back of the slide, pointy side towards the end of the gun, obviously. Then we place our spring assembly, big spring over small spring in there. And then we replace our firing pin retainer simply by setting it in there gently. As it does not appear to fasten in there in any manner. If you look at the frame, the lower of the handgun, there's a hole But this piece fits in right here at the back. Alright, so field stripping, that's all we're going to do. Although, with this firearm, I would never field strip it, in the field, that is. Because this comes out really easy. Imagine trying to find a firing pin in the grass. So we've got our slide spring, our recoil spring right here. It installs under the barrel. I assume this piece of plastic goes to the front, just like every other firearm. It has a little plastic tab that goes in the hole at the bottom. There's no hole, but it goes against that. So to reassemble our high point, we've got the firing pin back in, the retainer back in. We're going to drop our recoil spring in here. Going to put the slide over the recoil spring. And I'm trying to show you this, but I'm going to put the spring against the front of the slide there and aim the barrel into the hole. Notice my angle here. I've never done this before, so it might not work. Once I get it over the barrel, I'm gonna, I guess, line this plastic piece up with this hole right here, because this is how it charges the firing pin spring, and smack it together. Look at that. Do a function check. No magazine. Huh. Again. Oh, the magazine slipped out. Slide locks back like it's supposed to with an empty magazine. Magazine taken out. Slide releases properly. Magazine back in. Safety on. Gun will not fire. Safety off. Gun will fire. One more time, take the magazine out. Charge it. Test the magazine disconnect. The gun should still not fire. It does not fire. So it's functioning as it should. Do not forget to put your roll pin back in, because this gun might fly apart while you're shooting it. So we'll take the roll pin, we'll line it back up with the hole here. See the hole? Lining it up right there. And as I said, that slide's sort of in the way. Alright, it's flush on this side. Good. So it's flush. If you don't get it flush, the slide's not going to function properly. Oh yeah, can't release like that because it's locked back. So it doesn't have what most guns have, where if the slide is locked back by the lever, the manual slide lock, like this firearm here, you can release it with the slide lock, like so, or you can pull back and release it, because this is spring loaded. This is not a spring loaded slide lock or a spring loaded safety, so you have to manually release it. Now when it does lock back with the magazine, it's a different case, because that's held back by this physical piece of the magazine right here in this corner where the bullet's not there. So it will release like it should. So you wonder why they couldn't incorporate this too, because the slide is still locked down with the magazine out. Slide won't release. Banging on it, that's good. If you want to get a look at what the sights look like, maybe you can see it like that. You can see that there's red indicators on the rear sights, yellow indicator on the front sight. Now let's try cycle some ammunition here. I don't know where my snap caps are. I wouldn't recommend using live ammunition for a function test. I would definitely recommend using snap caps or ammunition with the primers removed, something like that. So I've loaded 2 Federal 9mm rounds, and it loaded the first round correctly, ejected it correctly into the iPad. That's good. Ejected the second one correctly, and the slide lock back. Got my gun put up. Keep the kids away. I want to test my trigger, I would say, although it's not much to it. This piece just turns apparently. Goes in on the right hand side of the gun. It looks like this piece fits into there. The gun is clear. Piece goes into there. Other piece comes over and slides over it. And I guess you just set it down and you push down and turn. Ow. Turn to engage. Doesn't look very sturdy, but it might keep a kid out of there. So now my firearm's locked up. Stick the magazine back in it. I can rack the slide, I can mess with it, but can't pull the trigger.